what strikes me, I'm an Englishman, but I live in the United States of America, about all of this is that, yeah, it doesn't want to stay down and look at me. I may have to move.
Yeah.
Is that this battle may, at the end of the day, be fought in the schools, in the infant schools, in the universities, on the battleground of the growing minds of young people. Because such a large proportion of young people, particularly where I live in the United States, by the time they reach puberty, it's almost too late to try to explain to them that news would be a good thing, and that news used to be a good thing, and that news is actually more important than entertainment, and that news is the way they will find a path to finding some meaning in their lives. And news is something that, by and large, you don't get in the United States of America. Certainly none of what happens here will appear anywhere in the United States, and very little will come out of Gaza. There will be very little reasonable discussion about what might happen there and what should happen there, and the things that are going on. There are, however, pinpoints of light in institutions of education, as there are in other institutions of the United States. I myself have occasionally written op-ed pieces in support of divestment, for instance, in the Presbyterian churches of North America, which 2 years ago we failed to get a vote to divest from Caterpillar and Hewlett-Packard and Motorola and others by 1 vote or 2 votes, something tiny. 2 years later, in a different town, I think in Chicago rather than Pittsburgh, that vote was passed. So that body has now divested from Caterpillar and Hewlett-Packard and Motorola, and which is a step in the right direction. So the machine is beginning to rumble forward, thank goodness, and finally. So we should take we should take pleasure from that and notice it and encourage it in every way. In the arena within which I work, which is in rock and roll, 1 or 2 of my colleagues are beginning to stick their heads up above the barricades now. People like Eddie Vedder and Bryan Adams, and it's a long time coming, but it is coming, and slowly there will be a body of opinion that develops alongside Brian Eno and myself and the Pixies and Elvis Costello and a few other people who've stood up to be counted so far. And so my involvement in BDS, which is pretty well the most important thing I think that I can do, because to sit at dinner parties trying to convince people that to learn something about the world is a good thing in the middle of parochial New York is a complete waste of time. So one has to be much more direct in one's actions. There's a thing in the show I've just done, which is strangely enough called The Wall, which I've done all over the world, where there's a graphic on the wall, and it's the last sentence from 1984. And it's the most chilling thing that Orwell has to say in that short novel. And it is this. He says, Winston suddenly realizes that the battle is over. He has won the battle with himself. He loves Big Brother. And that's the end of the story. Well, this is the end of the story that at all costs, we must never see come to pass. So that's why we have to keep fighting. That's why Michael is so right about the law and how important it is that we attach to the rule of law. I find myself banging my head against this often in my life now, and I go, what about Article 29? What about Runnymede? What about 1290? What about habeas corpus? And they look at you as if you're insane. What are you talking about? What do you mean? We have to protect ourselves from terrorists. We can't be bothered with all that. And that is what is our most serious enemy, is the attitude of the militarists and the parochialists and those who would defend themselves at all costs, all costs. I think that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Roger.